Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here today to present amongst so many esteemed and inspiring speakers. I found it interesting to hear patterns emerge from conference speakers around the themes of collaboration, listening, and learning. And on that note, I'd like to start with something Donella Meadows said that really resonates with me. She said the scarcest resource is not oil, metals, clean air, capital, labor, or technology. It is our willingness to listen to each other and to learn from each other and to seek the truth rather than to be right. Donella Meadows was a system thinker and an American environmental scientist, educator, and writer. She had a PhD in biophysics from Harvard, and she is best known as the lead author of Limits to Growth and Thinking in Systems. And the leverage points that she identified as to how to intervene in a system have greatly influenced my thinking about climate change adaptation. And this slide is an overview of the work the team I am on at IO performs in building energy management, infrastructure, climate resilience, sustainability and certifications, and energy model and contract advising. We do this work for the provincial portfolio for multiple asset types in various regions of the province at all phases of their life cycles. This overview is also a tool for engaging our colleagues to uptake our services and collaborate with us on bringing energy efficiency, sustainability, and climate resilience to IO built and managed assets. As an agency of the Ministry of Infrastructure, Infrastructure Ontario implements provincial policy as it relates to infrastructure provision and management throughout Ontario. My journey in bringing climate resilience to the work of IO began in 2018 with the release of the Made in Ontario Environment Plan. The plan called for climate change impact assessments, building resilience into the province's critical infrastructure, and keeping vital services operational during extreme weather events. So what is infrastructure resilience? Essentially, it is the planning and design required to limit negative interactions between climate events and infrastructure components. In March 2019, I was presenting on this generic concept of infrastructure resilience, saying to colleagues, what resources do you need to pursue building resilience into your projects? I referred them to Canadian and Ontario-based resources on climate change adaptation, published by many of the speakers in this conference, and said, contact me if you'd like more info or ideas. By November 2019, I had translated infrastructure resilience into the development of an IO infrastructure resilience strategy, which relies upon a targeted set of resilience measures to be implemented within existing IO business processes, particularly project delivery, capital planning, and operations. The measures in the strategy included climate risk assessments to inform output specifications for new construction projects, an IO lead guideline to recommend to all projects uptake of credits with favorable energy and climate resilience impacts, a flood resilience assessment of 130 priority assets within the provincial portfolio, flood mitigation measures, including weather warnings, resilience audits, and dedicated emergency response services, a flood resilience checklist for base building assessments, energy and resilience measures in our owner project requirements, climate considerations for environmental assessments, climate resilience analytics on work order and incident data, and fostering awareness of IO's resilience program in general. I will not be able to speak to all of these measures in detail, but I will elaborate on a few of the key ones implemented within our capital planning, project delivery, and operations divisions. So how did I get from here to there? Infrastructure resilience to a targeted suite of resilience measures. Well, I looked at the extreme weather that was happening in Ontario, across Ontario, and its impacts on communities and infrastructure. For example, in the summer of 2018, 39 forest fires raged across northern and northwestern Ontario, while the following spring of 2019, half of Ontario was under flood advisories, and 15 municipalities had declared climate emergencies. I did my research on what constituted climate change resilience and the policy standards and processes available to enact it, whether by governments, insurers, or the market. I was informed by early literature on climate resilience, including the Municipal Climate Change Action Plan Guidebook, published by the Canadian and Nova Scotia governments in 2011, that said early adoption of policies on climate change will help to develop a strategic approach to determining where to best focus municipal efforts, resources, and new infrastructure expenditures. I read the Zero Emissions Building Framework published by the City of Toronto in 2017 that said, among the actions that the city will need to take to ensure Toronto's resilience is designing and constructing buildings to withstand extreme weather disruptions and provide a refuge during periods of shocks and stresses. And the Climate Resiliency Design Guidelines, published by the City of New York in 2018, which said relying on sewers alone to manage extreme precipitation events will not be sufficient in a changing climate. And finally, the Climate Lens, published by Infrastructure Canada in 2019, that provided much needed project level guidance on how to both mitigate greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to a changing climate. But above all, I did not underestimate how much you can get done by talking to people. I talked to ministry staff to better understand legislation, policy, and program direction related to climate change. I talked to my colleagues at IO to gain relevant insights into existing business processes within project delivery, capital planning, operations and asset management, finance, procurement, project management, leasing, lending. I talked to IO's service providers to hear about the operational experiences of CBRE energy managers, facility managers, the health, safety, security, and environment team, and the capital planning team. And I talked to subject matter experts to engage with data-driven perspectives on climate resilience. This led to launching our first climate resilience project at IO in 2019, a portfolio-level climate resilience flood assessment performed by Ontario Climate Consortium in partnership with Conservation Ontario. The brains and hard work of the OCC team were the secret of this first climate resilience success at IO, particularly Glenn Milner, Sharon Lamb, and Nichelle Shaw. I learned a lot from working with that group. Additionally, I was very specific about the scope of the project and the required outcomes, which I based on portfolio analysis and all the sustainability reports that had come before me, and talking to my colleagues, and I think that contributed greatly to its success as a project. Particularly, I wanted to assess not just our risk, but our resilience, and that was enacted by OCC, included by OCC's inclusion of indicators of our adaptive capacity, like backup power, sump pumps, and physical flood protections in their overall assessment. I also wanted the deliverables of the study to be easily understood by my IO colleagues, because I knew if they weren't, they would not be successful in affecting change. The deliverables of the study included a flood resilience assessment tool based on 40 indicators across hazards, vulnerabilities, and capacities, a 70-page report on the study's methodology and findings, and a flood risk mapping layer of assets assessed that was published within our IO GIS platform. Starting with a portfolio-level flood risk assessment offered valuable insights into the quality of data available to adapt IO-managed assets to climate change. IO manages an enormous amount of data on the provincial portfolio and relies on very robust portfolio data to do our best work. Yet some of the questions around climate resilience had not been asked before, and thus the data was either not being recorded or not being analyzed. For instance, we did not have as much building level data on systems like sump pumps, backup power, backwater valves, roof drains, and stormwater ponds as was sought for the assessment. Why? Because asset management is based on asset replacement value, and these systems are relatively small in the larger context of a building having a replacement value of under a $10,000 threshold. Yet the presence and maintenance of these smaller systems are some of the best indicators of potential flood risk for a facility. So I brought this data gap and the idea of a resilience checklist up to my colleagues in capital planning, and they responded positively by suggesting such data could be gathered within the existing building condition assessments that are conducted on the provincial portfolio on an ongoing basis. By listening to, learning from, and collaborating with my colleagues, the general idea of a checklist of flood resilience factors became a specific list of building systems related to flood resilience and a request for more data on their characteristics such as sizing, location, and age. The IO Flood Resilience Checklist was piloted this past November as a part of 5 base building assessments and with promising results. And IO Capital Planning has now made changes to their business processes to require that in our asset management information software, all backflow preventers must be identified as a separate component, and all visible observations from the flood resilience checklist must be recorded at the comment level of the appropriate building system. Moving forward, we look to expand application of the flood resilience checklist to more buildings within our portfolio and to further develop the checklist to address climate risks beyond flooding. Coming back to the idea of where to intervene in a system, the very start of an asset's life cycle in the project budgeting and design phase is the most cost-effective moment to intervene for better climate-related outcomes, including carbon, energy, and occupant safety and comfort. It is critical to surpass the building code and status quo in terms of energy and climate resilience for new construction projects today. And it just doesn't make sense to be designing assets for the future with weather data from the past. As Lisa DeMarco said in her talk yesterday, you may be exposing yourself to liability if you're not diligent in your design. For instance, did you know that the February 21 North American winter storm, which refers to 6 significant winter storms that impacted North America just last month, most significantly in Texas, caused the largest blackout seen in the US since the Northeast blackout of 2003, which at the time was the world's second most widespread blackout in history. While these recent tragic events that left people without electricity, heat, and potable water were the result of global climate change, the extent of their impacts were moreover the result of not preparing by designing critical infrastructure assets for today and tomorrow's extreme weather parameters, which are currently fully available to us through climate modeling and climate risk assessments. We have the information, why wouldn't we use it? So performing climate risk assessments for new infrastructure assets is just getting underway at IO, thanks to the collaboration of my colleagues in project delivery, finance, and portfolio planning. It has been a learning experience for me to understand that when I say risk, I mean climate change risk. And when my colleagues in project delivery speak of risk, they mean risk to, they mean any project timeline delays or budget overruns that put a project's completion at risk. I quickly realized that I could not advise on climate resilient output specifications for new builds without them being informed by a climate risk assessment. And I could not ask projects to conduct a risk assessment that was not foreseen in the budget or timeline. Thus, it made most sense to embed a project-level climate risk assessment within the existing suite of due diligence services, including environmental assessments, archaeology, natural heritage, geotechnical, that IO conducts during the planning phases of an infrastructure project's development. Thus, it did not disrupt the existing business process, but fit right in. There are also a number of climate resilience measures we have taken at IO within our asset operations over the last 2 years. These measures are based on collaborations with IO's property and land management service provider, CBRE. Among them are weather alerts, a weather alert system that serves to notify facility staff of imminent extreme weather events in their region and what measures they can take in the short term to increase resilience to that event at a facility level. Dedicated emergency response services for site assistance, resilience audits to better understand and document root causes of climate-related damages and program interruptions at individual facilities, as well as gathering and analyzing portfolio-level data on the costs of extreme weather causing asset damages or program interruptions. So overall, when it comes to integrating climate resilience into existing business processes, I can't stress enough the importance of setting a vision or strategy and collaborating with your colleagues to achieve it. Start by gathering data on systems you seek to manage. Where are the sump pumps? How much backup power do you have? Are backwater valves installed on storm and sewer connections? Also take low-cost, low-regret actions towards resilience today. Don't underestimate the small stuff: roof drains, culverts, sump pumps, flood sensors, bioswales. and make future weather parameters a given in asset management planning. Remove institutional barriers to innovation and adaptation. If someone tells you it's not in the budget, go talk to who makes the budget. Leverage the knowledge and decision-making power of others. Most people want to help with the issue of climate change, so let them. Vision the future you want to see. There's a lot of power in presenting a vision of a climate resilient asset management. It plants a seed in people's minds and offers a tangible, desirable outcome to work back from. Don't just speak of climate resilience, show what it looks like. Thank you very much.